your seats, please. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, very happy to welcome you here to this side event hosted by Liberia, together with UNOPS and the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute and ICAT. Very happy to see many familiar faces in the audience and also some new faces, so I look forward to a very engaging and good interactive session. I can promise you we have some excellent, outstanding speakers, very interesting experience to share with you, and we know that also in the audience there is a lot of rich experience, and we encourage you to join us then for the discussion at the end. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Professor Tarpa. He's the Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency of Liberia, a former Minister of Finance and Commerce, Executive Director of the African Development Bank, and former President of the Agricultural Cooperative Development Bank. Now heading the EPA, which is really in charge of climate policy for Liberia and our partner for the ICAT project in Liberia. And we are really very pleased that His Excellency Professor Tarpa was able to join us for this event, and we're of course extremely honored to be able to share the side event together with Liberia. So before giving the floor to Professor Tarpa, I also want to introduce my colleague GHGMI. He's a manager of the UNFCCC Transparency Division and in charge of the support for the intergovernmental process, but also more broadly for the MRV and transparency work. And I'm sure he's very well known to many of you, and you're closely engaging with him. We are also very pleased that he's very closely linked to ICAT. He is representing the UNFCCC on the ICAT board, and as such, we are able to be in close touch with him. Before I invite those fellow speakers to take the floor, I just wanted to introduce the discussion that we are going to have here today and give you some conceptual background on what we want to discuss. And with that, I've got a few slides, and since I don't have eyes in my back, I'll have to look here at the slides on my notes. The focus of the session today is on one particular aspect of transparency. It's about using data and transparency to drive NDC implementation and to mobilize finance. The enhanced transparency framework, I'm sure, is very familiar, very well known to many of you. It's the core, or one of the core aspects of the Paris Agreement. We always call it the backbone of the Paris Agreement, since it is a hard obligation for all parties to the Paris Agreement, and as such subject to compliance monitoring. But if you look at it from the national perspective, and that's what we encourage you to do, then actually this obligation can turn into an opportunity. And the opportunity is to use transparency to engage national stakeholders, to engage all the sectors that need to be engaged, all the governmental levels to be engaged, to ensure national accountability, and then ensure the link to sustainable development priorities, which is the focus of today's side event. What we have seen in many of the country projects where we have worked with countries on that aspect is that they understand and recognize that the link to development priorities is essential in order to enable transformational change at home. And that is very much then linked also to the financing imperative in order to drive the implementation of the NDCs. So that's why we consider it an important aspect in a national transparency framework, and why we encourage countries to look beyond the reporting obligations and set up their transparency framework with a view to advancing national climate action, in particular, of course, the implementation of the NDCs. And here I want to highlight just a few elements that link transparency and NDC implementation and financing. NDCs, of course, need to be brought to life with an NDC implementation plan or an NDC implementation roadmap, whatever you want to call it. They need to be closely aligned with the long-term strategy, and many countries are now moving into long-term strategies, or some of the countries, and we will hear from them on the panel later on, have already adopted a long-term strategy. All of that to ensure that there is a potential for the transformational change required. In order then to move to the next level, they need to be complemented and supported by policies, and there the assessment of the greenhouse gas impacts and the sustainable development impacts of these policies play a critical role. If once you have such policies in place, you are actually able to engage planning ministries to move forward on the financing agenda and to encourage the risk assessment of investors in a positive manner. And in order to be able to manage that process, you then need to have the data and information required for projects, for the project documents, for a pipeline of projects that can support this. And you need to have an understanding of climate finance, which is why tracking of climate finance becomes so important. So those are the key elements that I think need to be connected, and we will probably discover many of them as we hear the presentations from our country speakers. I want to just end by referring to the elements in the ICAT toolbox that were applied by many of the country projects that you will hear from. Most prominently, of course, the Sustainable Development Policy Assessment Guide. This is supported by several tools that are available. The screen tool allows an assessment of the economic potential of climate action. We created this in the context of the pandemic to be able to facilitate an assessment of the economic recovery potential of climate action. And there's also the tool that focuses on the transport sector, which looks at transport co-benefits, which was applied in several countries demonstrating quite significant co-benefits that can be achieved through climate action in the transport sector. And last but not least, I want to mention some methodologies that are now coming out and will be available in the latter half of the year, focusing on climate finance tracking, a guide on Article 6 and how the accounting framework needs to be updated to be able to use Article 6, and last but not least, a guide on integrating air pollution into climate MRV to actually be able to make use of the air pollution benefits in this context. So, as I said, you will hear about some of these and the application of some of these in the presentations that we will have later on, and we then can come back to those also in the discussion. So with that, I would like to move to the opening statement and invite my colleague Jigme from the UNFCCC Secretariat to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Henning. Excellency, Professor Terpa, distinguished delegates, very good evening. Well, Henning has touched most of the points that I wanted to share, so that makes my life much easier. Yet, I want to thank ICAT for extending invitation to us to join this event and share some thoughts. And I wanted to share some of our thoughts around how we see transparency in the broader context. Because I think sometimes we tend to box transparency and collapse it within just within the context of just reporting and review. Whereas, as Henning just mentioned, I think that it has a lot more to offer. And that links very much to the overall goal of the Convention and the Paris Agreement itself, which is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change in the context of sustainable development and eradication of poverty. And as you very well know, one of the global response included a wave of submission of NDCs in lead up to Paris in 2015. Although at that point in time, these were referred to as intended nationally determined contribution, but most of that INDCs became NDCs, and subsequently much of those NDCs were revised or updated in lead up to Glasgow, and that process still continues. And as a result of that, what we saw was increase in ambition. One of the key messages coming out of this NDCs communicated was this link between the climate action and support and the sustainable development. And that key message comes out in almost all NDCs. They look at this linkage as a key to unlocking greater ambition and transition towards more sustainable, low-emission, and climate-resilient economy. And I think it is very critical that we as a global community, we are able to unlock that greater ambition very urgently. And this was something parties in Glasgow echoed very strongly when parties collectively stressed the urgency of enhancing ambition and action in relation to not just on mitigation, but adaptation as well as climate finance in this critical decade. In Glasgow, parties also recognized the importance of best available science for effective climate action and policy making. And here, I would also add best available data and information, because the robustness of the science depends on the robustness of underlying data and information. So in that context, the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement becomes even much more relevant. And it is through enhanced transparency framework that countries will demonstrate that they are delivering on the pledges, commitments that they have put forward in their NDCs. They will need to demonstrate that through implementation of these NDCs, there is change in the emission profiles, that emissions reduced substantially within this decade, that there is a robust flow of support for climate action. And all of this, much of this within the intergovernmental context can be realized through this transparency process that we have. At the same time, I strongly believe that transparency can also be of immense value nationally as a solid tool for informed decision-making, policy planning, so that it helps align the short-term, the mid-term, the long-term goals on the, consistent with low-emission, climate-resilient, and sustainable development pathway. However, from the experience for a number of developing countries, it is easier said than done. And that is mainly because this transparency regime that we have now in place, it's highly technical on one hand, and on the other hand, most countries have limitation both in terms of capacity as well as experience. And this challenges translates into multitude, multifaceted, depending on the national circumstances. That said, we also see some common thread across all developing countries. And this includes, for example, limited political buy-in, limited access to financial resources, weak institutional arrangements or systems, lack of or limited availability of data and information, and limited technical capacity. This explains why this dimension of support has been integral part of discussion or negotiation on operational rules for transparency, because now there is this widespread recognition that developing countries will need lots of assistance, support in their journey to make this transparency process a meaningful one, both internationally and nationally. So to that end, I would like to take this opportunity to commend ICAT for their excellent contribution and their ability to mobilize resources from international community and take it to the ground where it is most needed. I look at ICAT as one of the successful models of supporting developing countries, and that is based on my observation that the approach that ICAT has applied is they look at transparency in a much more broader context instead of collapsing it within just realm of reporting and review. And that is exactly, I think, what is needed going forward. So let me end here by wishing you a very interesting discussion. I believe I have looked at the name of the panel members. All the panelists seem to have excellent resumes, so I'm sure we will have a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much, and stay safe, and wish you a very restful evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jigmed. Very much appreciated, and I think we maybe focused in the same direction, but I think you did take a different perspective, so I think it was very much complementary what you provided as introductory words. Now, of course, we are very honored to have Professor Tarpe to take the floor, and I really want to thank him for joining us, and to Liberia for co-organizing and co-hosting the site event. We've been working with Liberia for now over a year, and I've had the honor and pleasure to witness the final process of the work on your NDC, and I've seen the leadership in the country in finalizing the NDC, which is very impressive and absolutely outstanding. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from you, Professor Tarpe.
Thank you very much. I think my brother has said you started it and he joined it, so my speech was short. I agree with all of you, so I'm done. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Let me say greetings to all of you. I bring you greetings from the President and the government, people of Liberia, His Excellency George Manawia, the government and the people of Liberia. Let me give specific recognition to our partners and, of course, the members of my delegation. ICAT is an important intervention. And what I will attempt to do today is to tell you what we as a party to the Paris Accord, what we've done in terms of meeting our commitment, the principal part of which is the NDC, how we approached it, and how ICAT was able to help us to get to that point. And share some experiences that we have in Liberia. When you talk about the quality of the data, you talk about the political buy-in, and we want to be able to share some experiences on that. We are here in Bonn today on the margin of the SB 56 to do a midterm review of the progress that we've made so far as the ICAT is concerned. As party to the UN Convention on Climate Change, Liberia is among many other countries that was required to fulfill their obligation in updating and submitting its NDC. In July of last year, 2021, thanks to a very brilliant team, Liberia was able to successfully complete their NDC and was submitted to the UNFCCC in August. We got approval before the end of August. The NDC revised covered 9 sectors, this time expanded. And some of the sectors will include energy, include transport, forestry, agriculture, industry, health, the coastal zone, fisheries, forestry, and what have you. Ladies and gentlemen, our updated NDC set key targets and actions for each of the 9 sectors that I just named. The National Energy Policy of Liberia, one of those policies are able to drive it. The National Environmental Policy, the National Forestry Reform Law of Liberia, National Fisheries and Agriculture Policy and Strategy, the National Climate Change Policy and Response Strategy, etc., are the key drivers that were used to come up with the NDC. In most countries like Liberia, both developing and developed, the arrangements for the NDC implementation have been revealing, and the revelation has been in terms of gaps in institutional capacity. Some of these gaps will include the following: the ability to launch and coordinate a whole of government processes incorporating contributions from all relevant governmental agencies and non-governmental parties as relevant. 2, capacity to integrate NDC priorities into sectorial and cross-sectorial programs and policies to ensure that the latter does not undermine efforts to achieve the former or vice versa. 3, resources to train relevant government agency and staff with a view to addressing the technical and managerial skills of these individuals. The sad thing about it, each of our countries is faced with a major fiscal difficulty. Number 4, the ability to engage all relevant stakeholders through consultations designed to elicit their input so that this can be taken into consideration, thus increasing the buy-in from stakeholders. Competence to conduct a regulatory framework revision to streamline and complement existing laws and regulations and strengthen related governmental processes and entities. 6, the ability to monitor progress and report on it, making the best use of existing data collection mechanisms and strengthening related capabilities where needed. In Liberia, 2019 to 2021, the government of Liberia, in partnership with Conservation International, implemented the Capacity Initiative for Transparency, CBRT project, with support from the Global Environment Facility, GEF, with the objective to build and strengthen Liberia's national capacity to implement the transparency elements of the Paris Accord. The setting up of the national NDC sector hubs in 5 ministries just to achieve that goal, including the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Energy, the Forestry Development Authority. 2, the constitution of the Project Steering Committee to increase policy buy-in for the capacity building transparency program. The next, the development of capacity building initiative for transparency communication strategy, series of gender GHGMI training programs, the signing of a project cooperative framework agreement among DC sector line ministries and agencies to ensure data exchange void of duplication. With the above-mentioned gains outlined, you can already see or begin to see that Liberia is making tremendous efforts to fulfill its transparency commitments to the Paris Agreement. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the government of Liberia, through the Environmental Agency, as part of the NDCs project implementation process, has done one. Ensure between 2020 and 2021, there were extensive national consultations on updating the NDC across the country. We also finalized a comprehensive NDC implementation plan, which targets the 9 NDC sector ministries with cost of $491 million. About 80% of this, or $400 million or $401 million, will be required to achieve Liberia's mitigation targets. The remaining 20%, or $89 million, is required to achieve its adaptation targets. To achieve the conditional portion of its NDC target, Liberia intends to mobilize an additional $460 million from the private sector, bilateral and multilateral sources, and all other sources, mechanisms, and instruments. The investment in achieving Liberia's NDC is approximately $3.2 billion. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, currently with support from the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, ICAT, the government of Liberia through the EPA of Liberia, working with the ministry and agencies such as the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, the Mrv City Corporation, the Ministry of Lands, Mines, and Energy, and through policy impact assessment of 3 national policies, namely the National Energy Policy of 2009, the National Transport Master Plan of 2012, and the National Environmental Policy of 2003. These instruments have been useful in pursuing our goal. Distinguished gentlemen, we believe strongly as a country that implementing our NDC will mean meeting, if not all, but most of the UN Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Finally, let me reaffirm the government of Liberia commitment to ensuring that all transparency elements of the Paris Agreement are fulfilled as we work assiduously to implement our NDC. Finally, we would like to share the experience that we have. When we're talking about political buy-in, it occurs to me that if you want somebody to buy something from you, you have to be able to sell it. And what we found out in the case of the EPA in Liberia, we're working disjointedly away from the government. So what we did with the help of the good people I have, all of you guys are here, please put your hands up. You did a good job. What we did was to take the National Development Plan of the country and wrap the NDC within the plan. When that was done, we got the buy-in of the government at the highest level. And so we hosted the first National Climate Conference convened by the President of the Republic. And that we're able to do. 2, how do we get uniformity? How do we improve the quality of the data? Thanks to ICAT and other resources we have, we're able to train people in those sector ministries apart from the budget provided by the ministries, because fiscally things are difficult, and we've been able to do that. So the point we are making is, if we must overcome and have our work done or overcome this issue of political buy-in, we must make strenuous effort to sell what we have. And by selling it, meaning try to coin it within the context of the National Development Plan. If you can create that synergy, create that similarity, create that reason for the political establishment to buy what you are doing, and let them understand. If you go to the Ministry of Finance, you tell the guy in the Ministry of Finance, listen, I see you trying to construct roads. Can you be able to come to the EPA, let us tell you how to construct a road so that the drainage system can be laid out this way, instead of putting lights on the street that will be powered by fossil fuel, can we use solar energy? That is how we've been able to do it. Does it mean that we got it all done? No, it's a long road, but we certainly are not there. So we want to say thank you very much. We hope we've been able to share the experience, but the ICAT intervention will continue to be a very powerful intervention that will help us pursue and accomplish our NDC, especially in terms of its implementation, because as far as we are concerned, we don't want an NDC as a document that will be put on the shelf. So we have an implementation unit, and as we speak, there's a roadmap that's been designed as to how the implementation is going to be pursued. The reason for that is when we get assistance from partners outside, we want to be able to sit with our partners. We have a roadmap, and this is how we go. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Excellency, Professor Tarpe. That was really inspiring, and I'm sure it will set a perfect scene for the discussion we will have. You started off by highlighting gaps, and I think just noted a few keywords: coordination, integration, resources, engagement, and ability for monitoring. Mm-hmm. And then you ended up by highlighting that the key in the end is the integration into development planning. And I think that is where I see a role for data, good data, mm-hmm. which you also highlighted, quality data, in order to be able to really give the confidence that there is an integration and that NDCs can be good for the country, because that's the only hope to make them implementable and useful. So I think you've really been extremely inspiring, and we were very much honored to be able to work with you on this process. Thank you so much. We will now change the stage, so we'll let you go, but please feel free to stay with us, and then I invite other speakers to join us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Excellency. Thanks, Sigmund. So let me invite the next set of speakers to join me here at the front table. I'm pleased to announce from Belize, we have Dr. Lennox Gladden. He's the Chief Climate Change Officer at the National Climate Change Office within the Ministry of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction in Belize. And he coordinates, communicates, and mainstreams all climate change-related activities nationally, ensuring a broader stakeholder engagement. So that is certainly quite a task. I'm pleased that we have from Mozambique Ms. Paula Pangene, and she's currently working at the Ministry of Land and Environment in Mozambique at the National Directorate of Climate Change. She is an agronomist by profession and the national coordinator of the BUR and of the ICAT project. We have from Cambodia Dr. Mao Hak, who is the director of the Department of Climate Change and of the General Directorate of Policy and Strategy of the Ministry of Environment in Cambodia. And he has taken part in many climate change negotiations and been engaged in marine and coastal management and development nationally, internationally, and in the implementation of maritime law for the prevention of pollution. From Fiji, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Ravneet Devan from the Climate Change and International Cooperation Division of the Ministry of Economy. Ravneet is the biennial update report coordinator and Fiji's ICAT focal point. And last but certainly not least, from Ghana, we have Dr. Antwi Moa. He's the Deputy Director of the Climate Change Department of the Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana, in charge of climate vulnerability and adaptation. He's a lead member of Ghana's NDC implementation team and deeply involved in the preparations of the National Communications Biannual Update Reports and Adaptation Communications in Ghana. And from Liberia, I would like to invite Mr. Jefferson Nyandibo, who is the UNFCCC focal point for Liberia, and he is heading the Multilateral Environment Agreements Division of the Environmental Protection Agency. So if you want to join us, please take your seat here. So we want to start with a round of brief presentations going along the table, and then we'll open up for any comments and questions and a possibility for a second round of discussions and questions. So let me start with Lennox from Belize, and I would like to ask you an opening question to please tell us how you integrated sustainable development impacts in your national climate change agenda, and what you see as the key elements of the framework for assessing and monitoring those impacts. Lennox, please.
Thank you again for the kind introduction, and of course, allowing me to participate in the session. This evening, of course, I'll be honing in on Belize's approach towards looking at some of the sustainable development impacts. What you need to take into consideration as a country and as an office, we do not divorce the respective agreements. For example, we have one common goal, which is overall poverty alleviation. Having that one common goal, we have to factor, of course, the Zendai framework. We take into consideration the Paris Agreement and also the Sustainable Development Goals. So during my presentation, it's keen to note that with that one goal, we are trying to merge as much as possible all these agendas. So with that, the way in which we interpret the actions, some of the implementing modalities on the ground, is we strive to build a level of awareness, because it's not a situation whereby we do not, as a country, as a people, we are not doing a lot. However, and this is commonly known, you cannot manage what you've never measured, right? So having said that, we took the necessary approach to then try to encapsulate the activities of all stakeholders. We take into consideration both state and non-state actors in this process. And we try to transition as well, because we had to close that loop. For the most part, it is beyond a reporting obligation, and this goes back to what the professor mentioned earlier, that in order to get that buy-in, it needs to go both ways, right? So you're asking for information, you're asking for data. If you provide data, they expect information from you at the end of the day. If you cannot close that loop, the buy-in is going to be quite stringent. So next slide, please. Right. A way in which we choose to overcome this challenge, and you see it from the courser list, is to include technology in the entire process. Noting, of course, within our national determined contributions, all of the granular activities, it's tagged to our sustainable development goals. So as I mentioned earlier, it is all interconnected. Next slide, please. Next slide. Right, next slide. Please proceed.
This one?
Yes. Right. So what we choose to factor in this entire process is the linkage between systems. A major challenge that we've seen is actually having a level of integration between indicators. As a developing country, as a country that operates within a certain fiscal space, it's a challenge for our stakeholders to have what we consider a one-stop shop for all climate change, all sustainable development goals-related both information and data. So in order to flatten this process, what we decided to do was, of course, to merge the indicators, and of course, we had, and we're quite grateful for the support that we got for ICAT in this process, to look at not only the GHG indicators, which are common, but also some of the non-GHG indicators to help to better inform decision-making. So our NDC implementation plan, of course, and even the process of formulating our NDCs, I think it's a common practice right now. We try to mirror it as much as possible to our national development plans, right? And this, of course, helped to enhance the receptiveness by the different stakeholders, and also, given our approach, it helps to enhance the engagement of civil society within this entire process. So for the NDC implementation plan, that in itself, it has its own nomenclature in this process. We look, of course, next slide, please. So what you're seeing as it relates to in order to minimize overlaps, minimize duplication, because when we try to look at the sustainable development goals and the impacts of the sustainable development goals and the whole costing process of it all, we need to carefully be able to track, of course, and as I mentioned before, you need to have some clear, realistic indicators. There are in excess of 100 indicators when you look at the sustainable development goals, right? We have that restriction, we have that capacity, that human capital restriction that won't enable us to track all those indicators, and all of those indicators aren't practical for our country. So we did that prioritization, and through this process, we have our NDC implementation plan, which again takes into consideration the applicable sustainable development goals for the country of Belize. All of these platforms, these are live platforms, by the way. Next slide, please. Right? And the idea is to really be able to flatten the process and increase integration among sectors. So through this process and through this climate risk information system, it acts as an enterprise information system. Enterprise information system meaning that we are now able to transcend the manner in which we provided that guidance, the manner in which we tag even climate finance flows within both the state entity and the non-state entity. It is a harmonizing platform that encapsulates the information systems from the Met Service, the information system from the tourism sector, from the agriculture sector. All of these information systems that either have data or information is housed on this platform, because in the absence of that, we will be fostering duplication that we cannot afford as a country. Next slide, please. Again, next slide. These are just snapshots of the interface as it stands right now. And of course, this brings us to the National Mrv System, which is quite a granular system. The granular system meaning it takes everything into consideration. The indicators coming from our medium-term national plan that leads into our low emissions development strategy, all those indicators and the costing that is linked to those indicators, the baseline and the projection. This system is able to, of course, track and provide feedback. It is managed access, of course, but all what you're seeing here, it helps to increase our level of transparency and accountability, not only to ourselves. As I mentioned earlier, we're now transcending beyond just a reporting obligation. We have identified the need for more evidence-based decision-making, right? Data-driven approach for policy formulation. So this intervention that you see here by bringing everything under one umbrella was key to, next slide please, right, in looking at the true impacts of the Sustainable Development Goals within the country. So I think this is my last slide, which shows it is, of course, as I mentioned earlier, a harmonizing platform that helps you get over that challenge of manual feedback to the sectors. We, of course, a couple of years ago, we were at the stage, if we want to reach out to one of our sector leads to get a level of feedback for our NDC, where we are in the implementation of our NDC, we had to make a phone call, right? And once we finished that process, we tag it, but then that feedback wasn't there. So by taking this approach with the support of our partners, it helped, of course, to now have that level of tracking of finance flows. But we're doing it a little bit reverse until the support comes along. We're doing a project-based approach, so all climate change-related projects, all projects related to disaster risk management, all projects that highlights initiatives as it relates to Sustainable Development Goals, goes on the online platform. And as I stated before, managed access. If you want to then gain access to another information platform, you then need to go enter into a data sharing agreement with them. So, but this is how we see the process and how it has worked for us. And of course, checking some of the impacts as it relates to the Sustainable Development Goals, which we do not divorce from the other agreements. Thank you, and back to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Linux. That was really very interesting, and I think you very nicely illustrated how you need a give and take in order to be able to engage stakeholders, also in terms of information and data, and with indicators that are tailored to your country and applicable, and then engage those stakeholders, that you pick them up from the sectors where they are. So I think that I'm sure we'll come back to that theme. I think it's also a nice illustration of Professor Tarpe's selling point that is required. Now let's turn to Mozambique, to Paula van Guene, and I would like to invite you to share with us Mozambique's experience. If you could tell us what were challenges, benefits, or opportunities that you identified in the application of the Sustainable Development Assessment Guide from ICAT. over to you, please. You have to press harder.
Thank you, Henning. This is the Mozambique presentation, which is we are going to present our application on ICAT Sustainable Development Assessment Guide. Let me take out. Yes, can you go to the next slide, please? This is the presentation. This is the content of the presentation. We are going to present the location. I'm not going into the localization for the Mozambique. I think that everyone knows where the Mozambique is. But I would like to say that we have had, I think that we can go into, yes, thank you. I would like to say that Mozambique has a fund from the ICAT in 2018, and we have implemented two phases, A of the phase 1 and the phase 2. I aim to these two objectives. The first objective was to strengthen the institutional arrangement for monitoring and the reporting on the climate change action in Mozambique. And the second objective was to develop the capacity to assess the impact of climate policy in action. For the ICAT phase 1, the output was to assess, for us was the assessment of the current institutional arrangement and identified barriers for the climate change policy and action. And the output 2 was to impact assessment on NAMA for charcoal, NAMA sustainable charcoal. And the output 3 was to impact assessment on the renewable energy feed-in tariff, which is REFIT. I'm going into quite deep to the NAMA sustainable charcoal. The work provides the assessment of the NAMA potential that contribute to the achievement of the NDC target, and how to promote the sustainable production on charcoal led by carbon sequestration. And also another objective also was the assessment contribute to the development of capacity for training the implementation of Mozambique NDC. Those was the output in phase 1. Of course, we had another output, but I will go deep on the charcoal production. On phase 2, we had another 2 different outputs, which is developed our institutional arrangement for MRV, including the NDC tracking framework. And another output was to capacity building on GHG inventory, training to the implementation of NDC, training on support needed and received, and also the GAGMU tools. I want to go deep on the institutional arrangement that we have already provided by the I want to go deep to the institutional MRV, institutional arrangement for MRV for Mozambique, for training the implementation MRV to the implementing our NDC, but also to implement or to MRV for our national communication. Now we are implementing we are finalizing the second national communication. We are implementing or the inventory, the GHG inventory, and also to implement the BOR, our BTR, because now we are implementing, we are elaborating our national, the first BOR for Mozambique. We are finalizing. But we also want to elaborate with this institutional arrangement. We want to elaborate the report for our national strategy, which is the national strategy for climate change for the Mozambique. In Mozambique, the coordination for the climate change is the Ministry of Land and Environment. And all those documents that I've said that they have to be approved by the Council of the Ministers, but they have to be verified by the institutional arrangement for climate change and also for the academia. And we have those sectors that have in green color that they are they have to elaborate the GHG inventory, and the other sector they have to be elaborate the tracking change on our national strategy and also our NDC. We have also elaborated. We said that now we have updated our NDC, and we have also submitted. And the experience resulted from the implementation of the ICAT project in Mozambique. We had a very good experience on opportunity for enhanced involvement of the sector for the consultation and the appropriation for the climate change issue. We have also developed our institutional arrangement for to implement our MRV, and now we are trying we would like to test this MRV on our third national communication and also in our BTR. We are also improved the capacity on the country on reporting the UNFCCC and enhancing the possibility for fulfilling the Mozambique NDC action. And we have identified the main risk, which is lack of fund to limited fund to implement our MRV, but also our INTF, which is the Enhanced Transparency Framework. And thank you. Thank you all.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very much. Now, this, I think you highlighted very nicely the importance of coordination and the institutional arrangements that are necessary. And I mean, I had the honor to actually meet your Prime Minister last year at the COP in Glasgow when he was presenting the NDC and was very proud, but also highlighting the importance of using that to enable the energy sector to develop and to modernize and advance. So I think the progress made in Mozambique since we've first been in contact has been extremely impressive. And so thank you very much for this contribution. We are now moving to Asia, and I would like to invite Dr. Mao Hak to present some of the experience from Cambodia. If you could highlight what your experience has been in building national capacity in assessing sustainable development impacts, and in particular, what feedback you received from stakeholders and what results you have been able to achieve.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hanning. First, I would like to express my sincere thanks to ICAT for inviting me to join this side events. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, before I come to the question, I just would like to share some information in Cambodia. I think we almost share the same impact, or we call climate crisis, that caused a lot of human life and also properties and economic loss, natural resource environment. And I'm sitting here in my city, Phnom Penh city right now. It's flooded by severe rain, so I think it happened almost everywhere. And we also see the impact of the COVID-19. I think that the combination of COVID-19 and climate change, it makes us getting worse and worse. Luckily, my country can make a decisive action in order to respond to COVID-19. And recent week, we have 0 case, so I think luckily. So we welcome all of you to visit my countries, and I think I expect to visit Cambodia for NAP training in July, and we welcome, and don't worry about COVID, we lucky. Climate causes a lot of impact to our GDP growth. Of course, we spent around 2% of our GDP in 2019. And the projection show that by 2050, the climate change impact our GDP growth around 10%. So I think it is very huge. And of course, I think respective countries set a development target. But if we don't take climate change impact into account, I think maybe our development target had to achieve. So it is very important that we need to understand how the impact of climate change into our respective countries. And of course, to respond to climate change, Cambodia developed 10 years climate change strategic plan, 2024-2023. And we expect to end by next year, and we need to explore what next, in order to respond to climate change impact. And the country just recently approved investment law, and under the investment law we also encourage green investment. It means that we give a low interest rate for the green investment. I think it's an opportunity to inspire or encourage the investor to come into invest in Cambodia. And I think it's similar to other countries. Of course, Cambodia developed and also submit our INDC in 2015, and recently, 2020, we submit our updated NDC. And I think updated NDC is very important, that also the assessment that we conduct, we try to link between climate action and also sustainable development goal. And on this, I raised the question to myself that when we look at the Sustainable Development Goal, Goal 13 talking about climate action, but why when we talking about climate change, we try to analyze the climate change action and Sustainable Development Goals? So I think it is a kind of very tricky question and work that we need to consider. However, we need to understand that climate change impacts everything, and climate change, I would say that it almost every activities and every development aspect. So sustainable development goal is also similar. That is why I feel, to my understanding, the world, they want us to linkage between sustainable climate change action and sustainable development goal. Of course, I think we try to develop or we try to apply different tools for climate change inventory and also mitigation reduction measures. And one of the tools, I think ICAT, they also very advanced to introduce ICAT Sustainable Development Goal. And on this, of course, Cambodia also apply. The application of this Sustainable Development Goal not only for the purpose of the application of the project that we get from ICAT, but we also use this this tool for the assessment of our NDC update as well. So I think it is how we prove the importance of the project that support by ICAT, and how we make use of this support to integrate into our country development policy or strategies. Having gone through, of course, I think it's similar to our colleague previously, that Cambodia also get the same support from ICAT. We have two phases. The first phase, of course, we apply with energy sectors, and the second one for transport sector. I think with this support, we cannot, I mean, with the short period of time, we cannot get support to apply all the sector. But at least, what sector that we apply, we can make use, and then we can expand to the other sector based on our understanding from the sector that we apply in our country. And we learned that, I think I cannot say that only one ICAT project that can raise awareness to my countries. Of course, the combination of different activities with different support from different partners, and of course with ICAT, it can make our people more understanding and more active participation. We see the increasing trend of the participation from our key relevant stakeholders, and also we see the speed of the development process between one phase to another phase. For example, when I look at the support from ICAT, when we get the phase one, we spend a lot of time to develop this kind of, to implement this project. But when we move to the second phase, we spend very short period of time, and then we can finish the project. And I would say that even we get better qualities compared to the previous one. I think this is how the impact of the support from ICAT, and how the improvement of our people capacity as well. But I also would say that the other aspect that can support the capacity building of the country, since we also, luckily that we get also the other support from other partners, and then we try to encourage the relevant line industry to take active participation for climate action. And on this, I think the more important thing is that the line industry, they develop their respective climate change actions. So it means that they know already that, okay, their respective ministry, they know what kind of activities or action that they need to apply in order to respond to climate change. So when we come up with the application of the ICAT Sustainable Development Goal, it seems like, okay, the people, they know something already. So when we apply it, okay, they get very active participation, and it really more time effective. However, I still say that the capacity building is still very important in the context of our country, especially. You know, we also accept that the internal resource, I mean the country resource is still limited, and we still need the external resource to support us. And you know, during the development of our report, it means that the people seem to understand, but after that they forget it. So in-depth understanding of the model, I think it's very important in order to make sure that we are able to do it by ourselves. And on this, I think we need to enhance more capacity, and we need to engage more line ministry, and also we need to make them that in-depth understanding what expectation we want to get and what the benefit that they also expect to get from the joining the activity with as well. I think our colleague also raised in order to convince the stakeholder to participate with us. Of course, they need to think about their benefit as well. So on this, I think it depends on what kind of strategy that we need to apply in order to convince them. And in Cambodia, of course, since we have when we implement this project, we try to engage different stakeholders, and we want them to play the ownership, whatever they propose. So I think this is very important approach that we have applied for our countries. I also want to link what happened in our country as well. You know, when we after we approve our updated NDC, we also develop online tracking system. And I would say that during the development of online tracking system, it also the same time with what the ICAT support during the phase 2. So it means that we work together, and I think it is very effective and also a very good experience in our country that we develop this. And right now, Cambodia also try to link between online tracking system for updated NDC and also long-term strategy. You know, Cambodia also approve and submit our the long-term strategy for carbon neutralities, and we expect that 2020 will be 2050. The country expect to be the carbon neutrality. So I think the combination of the ICAT and also updating NDC, we have the idea. Okay, how can we link the tracking system with the long-term strategy? So right now we try to merge between these two, and we hope that we will get a better information. And on this, you know, as I said, we give the ownership to the line ministry, and with our online tracking system, we ask the line ministry to submit their activities, and they can log in by themselves, and they can put the activity by themselves, and all other partner also can visit our online tracking system and can see how the progress in Cambodia. So I think it is what I want to share for the Cambodia context, especially the application of ICAT Sustainable Development Tool, and also how the progress of capacity building and engagement of the line industry. And I also raised the some gap that also faced in the country. You know, I think it's similar to other countries. Data is very important for our countries, and coordination is more important than that. You know, we need to get a very good coordination, otherwise we get nothing from them. So I would like to end my intervention here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mao. I think you highlighted very nicely how what role capacity building needs to play, and how this sustainable development assessment can be integrated into a successful capacity building approach, which is all about ownership and taking responsibility and taking the activities under control of the stakeholders. I realize that we are running a bit out of time, so we have to accelerate. And what I can assure you is that there will be some drinks afterwards. So if we can't manage the questions now here in this session, we will be able to do it afterwards. I understand that Antwi has to leave us, and so I want to make sure that we can still hear and benefit from his extremely valuable experience, and would like to invite him to share with us now the experience from Ghana and how you see the links between sustainable development impact assessment and your NDC implementation in Ghana. So, Antwi, please.
Thank you, Henning, and good evening. I think I'll be brief because almost everything is said in this room, and the experiences are almost the same. Just to also bring in an angle where probably we are also probably unique as a country. Ghana has been working with the ICAT projects for some time, and like other countries, we have had 2 phases. We're working on the second phase now. We use the first phase to do our BUR, that's biannual update report, and then also the second phase actually supported the second BUR and then also the updated NDCs. For the ICAT project, I think there are some kind of landmark activities that we can talk of. Everybody's talking about data, everybody's talking about systems, and I think we have what we call GCAP, which is Ghana Climate Action Reporting Program. That has been in system for some time. That system has actually produced a very comprehensive MRV system. That system has also produced 2 national communications. So we have already produced 4 national communications and then 2 BRs. The system has also been able to support us to come through the UNFCCC process, 2 FSVs, what we call facilitated share of views, where you exchange views with parties to actually tell them what you are doing. We have been able to, through the ICAT project, train what we call data champions. We're talking about capacity building. What these data champions actually stand for is that in each institution, you need to actually have a reliable source of data. And because this is coordinated by the host of the data, you need to have credible and reliable people in-house so that they feed the system. Because even if you have a robust system in place, you need people who understand the data, the format that is needed, and then input this data into the system to make the system function. And so we have very credible data system that actually work within these sectors. Largely the energy sector, the land sector, and when I say land sector, we talk of forest-related issues, agric, and then also transport sector, and then waste sector. So some other sectors, including water, but the key among them is the energy, transport, agriculture, and then forest-related issues. With ICAT project, we have also used a tool that we call GASMO. I think most of you have seen. So GASMO is what we actually used in updated our NDCs. It's very, in terms of utility, it's user-friendly. It's Excel-based tool that gives you very reliable information in terms of data. It's very easy to apply. And then based on that, we had to also build capacity of the institutions that will be collecting and then inputting this data. It is learning by doing, and then it's also hand-holding because you'll be working with experts, and then you become expert yourself, and then you also train other people. And so it's been very fantastic as we continue to grow our experience in using this system. We have been able to use this tool to also, in fact, our initial NDC was using baseline approach. I think we have a revised NDC that now looks at absolute targets. Basically, we use this tool to actually do the revision. It gives us a granular approach, as our colleague from Belize was talking about, so that you comprehensively deal with the information and then the data as they come into the system. In terms of sustainable development approach or sustainable development benefits, I think our focus with the tool has been mainly on two main sectors: energy and mainly renewable energy, talking about solar rooftop in terms of jobs that it has been created, savings that have been made, in terms of air quality, how much carbon monoxide that have been averted, and then the health improvement that have also been. So we have been able to use this information to enhance the updated NDC by actually estimating the number of people that could have been sick because of air pollution, the number of jobs that are estimated to be created, and in this case, green jobs, and then also in terms of beneficiaries, the number of people that are going to benefit in terms of economic and then social benefits. And this is estimated within the 10-year period, and it has an incremental addition when we do the beneficiary. We said it's going to benefit about 31 million people, and then people ask us, but Ghana's population is 30 million, and so how come you're going to have beneficiaries that are even more than the population of the country? And then we take our time to explain how this is done, because assuming year one of the NDC implementation, let's say 2 million people benefited as a result of this facility. And then in year two of the NDC implementation, these people, these 2 million people, plus maybe additional 2 million, then you don't discount the first 2 million, you don't take them away, because now they add to the value because they benefited in year one. So the amount of estimation in year one is different from in year two. And so you get this incremental, of course, there are a lot of questions with that, but we continue to explain to people, and then they get the understanding. And so the point I'm trying to make is that it's been able to help us to be able to estimate some numbers that are reliable, and then that can be worked with. Of course, there are some challenges that in terms of, because you need to do the greenhouse gas emissions estimations separately from the sustainable development benefit. And so if there's a tool that can, at one-stop shop, do the three together, it makes it much easier. We understand that there are some other tools that have been showcased here, but then if these are in one box that you can do to do the estimation, I think it will be great. We have learned a lot, and we continue to also learn. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Antwi. And I think Ghana is one of those very outstanding examples where you actually, through what you developed during the ICAT project, contributed also to other countries, because you created this innovation in GASMO, and that then has been applied in other countries like Mozambique. And I think we are looking forward to doing the same on the Sustainable Development Impact Assessment. I think also the invention of the data champions in the sectors, that's again something that Ghana started, and it's something that others are now replicating. So I think that is very much the spirit that we are following. Let me now invite Fiji, and Ravneet will share with us the national experience from Fiji, and I'm pleased that it will bring us to another sector, which is the agriculture sector. So please, over to you, Ravneet.
Thank you, Chair. First foremost, I'd like to thank the government of Liberia, GHGMI, and ICAT for inviting Fiji to this event. The ICAT project in Fiji started in 2020, and then Fiji identified that there was a need to set up the MRV system framework for the agriculture sector. The major deliverable we see from the ICAT project was to prepare a GHG inventory estimate and do a sustainable development assessment on the agriculture policies and the development of the national system guidelines. We had engaged 3 local consultants to do this work, and with the assistance of GHGMI. As part of the ICAT Fiji project, the 2 agriculture policies that were assessed were, the first one was the one for the livestock sector, the 5-year strategic development plan, which aimed to increase the production of livestock by providing improved breeds, feed, and development of the livestock rehabilitation center. So in this plan, the Ministry of Agriculture, they developed some programs which were aligned to increasing the livestock population by 10% by the end of 2024. And some of the action items that were included in this plan were to go to a climate-smart agriculture technology, optimizing the use of Django grass to enhance livestock production, and the waste management system for livestock farming. The second policy that was assessed was the draft National Rice Development Strategy, which mainly focused on strengthening the rice production efforts to maintain the food security in Fiji, and also providing a guiding blueprint focusing on efforts to develop Fiji's rice sector. So this rice development strategy, it guides the Ministry of Agriculture to achieve the increase in amount of rice production, which was initially intended to be consistent each year. This strategies proposed in this draft aims to achieve this by increasing rice productivity in the next 5 years in both wetlands and drylands, and by expanding the land area for the rice cultivation. So those were the policies that were assessed for sustainable development. The benefits of doing a sustainable development assessment was, so we were able to realign our action items that will lead to ensuring that food security is increased through improved production, and Fiji will be less dependent on imported goods. However, there was challenges also identified. Some of the challenges that were faced as the pandemic delayed the process of getting these policies endorsed and also implemented. So as we had the COVID pandemic, like most of other countries, I assume, most of the funding were allocated the allocations from different ministries were redirected to the health sector. So these were the challenges that we had faced. The lesson learned from the ICAT project provides a good it provided a good opportunity to operationalize the Climate Change Act. So Fiji last year in September, we had enacted the Climate Change Act, which ensures that all the line ministries submit climate-related information data to us that we will use for our reporting purposes. And through this ICAT project, we were able to streamline the processes such as the institutional arrangements, the MRV framework, and how the information will be shared from the Ministry of Agriculture to the Ministry of Economy, which has the climate change division embedded. Also, through the ICAT project, we had managed to train our national experts to assess the sustainable development impacts of the agriculture policy. It was quite a challenge at the beginning to get relevant experts to do this exercise. And then we had these training opportunities through ICAT and GHGMI that helped these experts to gain that capacity and then do these assessments. And also we had trained some of the Ministry of Agriculture staff together with the experts. And now I think that we need to continue the work on the agriculture policies that were assessed. And Fiji does not have the agriculture sector embedded in our NDCs. So our next aim is to embed the agriculture sector in the next update, the NDC update that we will do. So this will provide a good platform to get information from the agriculture sector. The ICAT project ensures that after the completion of the project, our reporting of GHG inventories will enhance. The agriculture sector can be included in our next NDC update. And this work has set the basis for our CBIT project, where Fiji is looking to build an online platform where data from line ministries will be stored. So, as I mentioned earlier, we had this Climate Change Act, which states that all the line ministries must submit activity data to us for our national reporting. So the next project, the big project that the Climate Change Division of Fiji is doing is the CBIT, Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency. So that's where we are trying to create a online platform where we will store all the activity data that we receive from the line ministries. So through this ICAT project, we have developed this MRV system and all these institutional arrangements that will feed into the development of this online platform. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very important experience, and I think the agriculture sector is not an easy one to engage, and I think your project shows that it is possible. And there, I think the focus on food security is an extremely important aspect in order to be able to engage such a difficult and important sector. We are way over time, and I'm extremely sorry, but I didn't want to interrupt the speakers because I think we have had excellent presentations, and they were so rich that it would have been a pity not to finish, to allow the time for them to be finished. And I also have to apologize to Mr. Jefferson Nyandibo, because he joined us to be able to respond to questions in the discussion, but we will only now be able to have the discussion over drinks. We have reception outside, and we would really like to invite you all and hope our speakers can stay, and then I invite you to engage in a more informal discussion with our speakers. But before we close, let me ask for another round of applause for these very good presentations. Thank you all for coming, and we be connected to what we will can present also next time, when we will go more into the financing aspects, which I think we didn't embark so much upon. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado. That's as far as I can go.